Meeting of the October 4th Plan Commission to order. First, we will hear from our technical facilitator.
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. The chair clerk and technical facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, all panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email list in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. The next item to consider is public comment, general public comment, and I do not see that we have any general public comment. Is that correct, Heather? Okay. Then moving on, communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Do we have any disclosures or recusals? I see no raised hands, so no communications, disclosures, and recusals. Next, we have the minutes of the September 20th, 2021 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Lemmer. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, I will assume unanimous consent on approval of the minutes unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand to object, the minutes of the September 20th regular meeting are approved. Information regarding schedule of meetings. We have regular meetings scheduled on October 18th and November 8th. I'm going to then take care of our consent agenda. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by the various city departments, and on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item tonight. Those items are placed on a consent agenda, and we will address them at the beginning of our meeting. Then people who are interested in those items can disconnect unless a member of the commission requests separation, in which case the item is removed from the consent agenda and taken in the regular course of business. Of the items before us today, the following are proposed for the consent agenda. Agenda item 4, and then 5 through 7 are noted to be referred at the request of the applicant. Agenda items 8, 9, 10, and 11. Are there requests for separation of any of those items? Seeing no raised hands, I will read those then into the record. The first item on the consent agenda is agenda item 4, Legistar 67407, authorizing the City of Madison to accept ownership of improvements from the Junction Ridge Neighborhood Association, which will create a neighborhood oasis in Junction Ridge Park, located at 8502 Elderberry Road, 9th Alder District. Then agenda items 5 through 7 are to be referred to November 8th meeting at the request of the applicant. And then for approval on the consent agenda, agenda item 8, Legistar 66976, located at 822 Miami Path, 10th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional residential consistent district for an accessory building exceeding 1,000 square feet of floor area, consideration of a conditional use to construct an accessory building exceeding 576 square feet of the ground floor area, and consideration of a conditional use for an accessory dwelling unit. Agenda item 9, Legistar 66977, located at 2513 Seaforth Road, 16th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the Industrial Limited District for a restaurant nightclub, and consideration of a conditional use for an outdoor seating area for a restaurant nightclub to allow reuse of a former restaurant nightclub by a new tenant. And then land divisions, agenda item 10, Legistar 66978, located at 3784 through 3796 Gala Way, Town of Cottage Grove, consideration of a certified survey map within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction to enlarge 3 residential lots. And agenda item 11, Legistar 66979, located at 3802 through 3820 Gala Way, Town of Cottage Grove, consideration of a certified survey map within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction to enlarge 4 residential lots. Is there a motion for approval? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. And now we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hand to object, the consent agenda passes unanimously. And now we will consider agenda item 2 under special items of business. Legistar 66918, Planning Division staff update on the Greater Easttown Area Plan. And my understanding is that Rebecca Kinnair will be giving a presentation on that. Rebecca?
Thank you, Chair Zellers, and good evening to all of the plan commissioners and our guests from the Economic Development Committee. I appreciate you all coming to kind of give your input at this special meeting, and it's great to be in front of you tonight. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So we have, and that is giving me a funny thing. Well, hopefully this will work. My aspect ratio might be off. We'll do our best here. So I'm here tonight along with several of my planning staff team to present where we're at with the Greater Easttown Area Plan and to get your input on some very crucial kind of decision points moving forward. And there we go. This is the things that I will be talking about tonight. And I want to start with the 2018 Comprehensive Plan. That was our starting point with this. And we saw during that plan that the Plan Commission in the city was already seeing this greater Easttown area as an area that would have a lot of change to it. And since that 2018 plan, I think we can expect that there might even be even more change. This large red area of general commercial now seems to have even a greater possibility of seeing change. So we wanted to look at how all of this area along the East Washington corridor, and the boundaries are roughly the East Washington corridor to the north, the interstate to the east. There's a railroad track to the south, and then Mendota Drive over by the Hy-Vee grocery store there on the west. We had a very robust public participation that we shared with our friends in the Odana area plan. So you've heard many of the groups that we met with, a variety of different formats that we experimented with very early on in this project. The interactive website mapping was a new thing for us to try. And we also had a variety of methods to reach traditionally underrepresented groups. I included in your memo for this evening some more specifics on those. But in particular, I think we were continuing our use of social practice artists to gauge input from a variety of people not normally wanting to be a part of this process, our city's neighborhood resource teams. And I think the crown of this engagement was really the trio of chambers, the Hmong Chamber, the Black Chamber, and the Latino Chamber that we met with over a course of several meetings to really get input on how they see themselves in the future of this area. Some of the key findings from those underrepresented groups is about affordability is not just critical for housing, it's also critical for the growth of businesses and entrepreneurship. And we need entertainment and recreation for all ages. I'm not going to read the whole slide because you all have had this in advance, but we are seeing how different ways and different programs that this plan may not always be able to address, but maybe future policies can address on moving forward and making Easttown and Odana area welcoming. One of the things that we just started just today was racial equity and social justice analysis of our recommendations to date. So that began today, and we'll be continuing that over the next few weeks and learning more through that process as well. In our phase 2 meetings, the feedback from our Zoom meetings was pretty positive. The greens are on the right tracks and more right than wrong track, with a few things in each of the areas where people are saying that we're on the wrong track. And we tried to listen to some of those and take note of those and make some adjustments where we thought that they were best suited. Part of our planning process was developing 5 guiding principles to sort of center ourselves as we make the decisions moving forward. And this will continue to be very important as we move to the next phase of this plan, which will be looking at those policy initiatives and more than just the mapping that we're sharing with you tonight. And the first of those guiding principles is creating a place here out of what sometimes seems like no place. Focusing on mobility and equitable access to transit, the BRT corridor is going to be such an important part of this area and how we can have connections better to that system and throughout the systems. How we can think about community wealth building moving forward so that we can have lots of opportunities for all of our residents of Madison. We also see an area that has so much parking and little tree coverage that we really wanted to think about centering nature and sustainability. We are very lucky in this area to have an amazing resource of the Starkweather Creek on the southern part of our planning area, and how can we make that a centerpiece moving forward. And also, as we've all learned, resiliency and being flexible and resilient to kind of meet with and keep up with changing conditions as they come. And here's 2 examples, of course, of how buildings have already done some of that. So we'll come back to the comprehensive plan here. So, and then and looking at this comprehensive plan, sorry to go back, our MPO did some growth projections along with the bus rapid transit project to see what types of growth projections we could see in this area. And this area has, as you can all very well guess, a lot of potential, and over 2,500 units could be built in the next 15 years. And that could even be even more depending upon how growth happens here. But a full build out of this area at the old plan, which doesn't include some of the changes that we're making to the general commercial area, says that there could be 16,000 new people, 9,500 new dwelling units, and 27,000 new employees in this area. And some of those metrics and balances might change with changing economies and employment. but we can get a sense about how much economic growth potential there is here. So in May of 2021 was our last, at the very end of the month, was our last public meeting series. And this was the map that we had kind of shown them to get input on. And we've made some changes since then. And this is the map that we're sharing with all of you tonight. And there's some key changes since last time. We've changed how we're showing our parks area. We're following what Odana area plan did and having an overlay of the parks area. So then we needed to have some underlying land uses that made sense under those areas if those parks didn't come to fruition. So the area number 1 went back to industrial because that's what is in front of it and what's in the comprehensive plan. Area number 2, upon advice of Alder Halverson and others, we switched from a general commercial to a community mixed use to really take advantage of all of that parking lot along Lean Road and the pretty short walk comparatively up Thera Road to the bus rapid transit stop there. Areas 3, we also added some density and made that CMU because it's right on the bus line. Areas 4, 5, 6, and 7 down there at the bottom were all really taking cues from an area that we had shown as potential parkland and showing what those underlying land uses could be if they weren't park. So 4 moves itself into residential. 5 goes into kind of a general commercial because there's a little bit of a node down there. And then 7 is medium density residential. And then we also we had the lower residential or low medium residential kind of along the creek. And we really heard that it was kind of split up and it wasn't really working in several different parts. So how could we create a real neighborhood? And so we've created this area of 8 that tries to be a larger, lower density, but still a lower medium, lower residential uses, but still likely not single family homes. We also, as things change here, think that this kind of middle areas of an extended high crossing boulevard and an extended Independence Lane could really end up being the core. So when we talked about the core in the Odana area plan as well, where could the storefronts be? Where is that highest, most dense use that could happen? And we're thinking that would happen kind of right where the mall is now. But as things could redevelop, that's where we see that happening. The building heights that we've chosen here really correspond to the land uses, and we've kept that pretty consistent throughout this planning process. This is our natural areas map, and I show this mostly because it really informs the parks and open space map next. And this was the one that we showed in May, which we were saying, hey, there's a lot of potential for parks, especially along this the Starkweather Creek. But we got some really important feedback from the Board of Parks Commissioners that said that they wanted more parks spread throughout and park staff said so that every new resident could really be within a half-mile walking distance of a park. So we've switched that around to a map that, again, is an overlay on our land use. And what this comes down to is keeping this proposed potential expansion of Mayfair Park down here on the southeast or southwest portion, keeping the green space along the creek here to really help. And as we learn more from our Starkweather Creek watershed study, we'll learn more about what we need in that area. Thinking about maintaining a larger community recreational park space in this area on what parcel of land that would obviously still be up in the air, but we're looking in this general area here. And then a smaller 2 to 5 acre park, kind of one each in these 2 blue areas that could give new residents a closer access to park. And then we've also really been talking about this kind of central urban plaza. And it's not just a median. We really would like it to be a place that has some activity, has some programming. We realize that takes a lot of effort to do that kind of programming. So we've been exploring other cities and what they do to manage those areas, but also keep them public, because that was very clear in what we heard from feedback is we want places that are public and welcoming to all residents of the city. And so keeping them public is an important part of that and not privatizing our public or open space. So thinking about maybe it's a business improvement district or a community improvement district kind of to manage those spaces. One of the other things is we looked through our comprehensive plan and kind of centered ourselves on those recommendations. We looked at one of the recommendations in the culture and character section talked about view corridors. And there's a lot of views of the Capitol from this area. So we wanted to think about what those impacts would be. And so we did this map that picked out some publicly owned lands or some potentially publicly owned lands. And those numbers on that map are the sea level elevations of those. So we wanted to see what kind of impacts would those capital views have, and what are the trade-offs of maintaining some of those views, and do we maintain all of those views? So a little diagram, not to scale, because this is 5.5 miles from kind of end to end, is to show that the capital preservation height is really 1,038 feet above sea level. The square itself sits at about 917. And so when you come all the way over to High Crossing Boulevard, or High Crossing Park, which is at elevation 1010, you can see that at the Home Depot site at that elevation, and I use that just as a name that people might figure out where I'm talking about, you have about 90 feet of building room before you get to that Capitol View preservation limit. And even though, again, we know that the Capitol View height preservation limit only goes a mile out to the Capitol, we extended that for this exercise to look at our comprehensive plan recommendation. And then at the mall itself, you have about 140 feet. If you come down to the High Crossing Boulevard location right there, as you're crossing the interstate and coming over the interstate, you'll see that you have about 30 feet of room at the Home Depot site and about 80 feet of room at the mall site. And the reason that's kind of important is because of how it affects the heights. And we did some ground truthing on this. I didn't take pictures myself that day, and these are Google pictures, but we've certainly explored the area out here. And this is that view from High Crossing Boulevard. You can see the Capitol. It's kind of small there in that little circle, but you can absolutely see it as you come over the hill. However, from the view from High Crossing Park, even though kind of exploring the area all around High Crossing Park, which is right here, I couldn't ever actually see the Capitol, even though it was on our list of potential places that you could see. So depending upon the Plan Commissioner's recommendations on trade-offs here, we could do even more investigation on what areas would be affected by this. And so the reason that we wanted to do this is to show you what those trade-offs are. So we have been talking about areas of 12 stories in height here in this darkish purple, and 6 stories of height in some of these community mixed use areas. And this blue line, this kind of thick line, is sort of an area that could technically be affected. Again, we'd have to do some more real studies to figure out exactly, but could be those areas that could affect that. So, and that's roughly about 5 to 6 stories could be built in that. And that's a pretty big trade-off when you're talking about 12 stories versus 5 to 6. And so that's why we wanted to explore how important that view is to plan commissioners and to our alderpersons and other policymakers in the city, so we can talk about figuring out how to move forward on that. To quickly move on to our transportation recommendations, one of the big ones is to really take a larger look at the East Washington Corridor study with the BRT investment and the Metro route restructuring. We want to think about how to make this area much more easily for people to walk and bike and drive around. We've talked about a new street network. Some of the priority streets are in red, some that would not necessarily require any demolitions, but some of those secondary streets in the purple would require demolitions. So that would, be a later part of kind of restitching the grid back together in this area. We have some ideas about what some of those streets could look like as they become more urbanized and less kind of suburban with parking lots. And we think that they give a sense about what these places could really become moving forward within the same right of way that they are now. Going from, very kind of fast, because there's not a lot of residential or other uses around it, to a much more urban neighborhood street. The sidewalk network, our transportation department has done a really good job of looking at the future sidewalk extensions as related to BRT. And so we're expecting to see many of those peach sidewalks put in through that process, but there's a few other missing links that we would need to fill in, as well as on any of our new streets. And then the same with bicycle. The Metropolitan Planning Organization and Madison DOT has really identified a lot of the on-street facilities that are either existing or planned, and we want to do the same with all of the other new as well. Moving on to proactive rezoning, we've talked about why this is important to help really unlock development potential. So we've really honed in on 2 things, and one is looking at proactive rezoning along the BRT and in the mall area. We think those are the areas that most need that just ready to go redevelopment. So you see all of those purple RMX areas. They go from CCT along is the existing zoning along East Washington Avenue, and CC is the zoning in the mall area. And we're thinking all of that should really be switched into the RMX zoning. There's also this tiny little spot of 3 homes that are in, and I wrote it down because I always forget what it's called, SRC1, that we also could maybe explore putting into CCT just to have it be more consistent with its areas around it. But they are 3 homes, so we would want to talk to those property owners if that was something that we wanted to move forward with. These are some modeling that we did back in May. So they do not reflect some of the changes that we made. And depending upon our discussion tonight, I will be going back and kind of redoing these SketchUp models for the final plan. So just be aware there's some differences, but it still gives this general idea about the amount of change and the extent of the change that could really come here. We see the beginning phases of BRT coming in and having some infill on existing lots. Then, we see as more development happens, maybe there's some demolitions, maybe there's some building of some new streets. We get some parks facilities and other amenities that come in. We also potentially could see a partial mall demolition where there's some empty anchors right now at the old Boston store and the old Sears. If those were to be redemolished, you could start to link that grid together a little bit more. And then, potentially, the mall could go away. We don't think that this plan requires the mall to go away for a lot of successful development to happen here, but we do see a lot of potential. And I will kind of click through these. So some of the input that we've had from our BCCs is Board of Parks Commissioners wants us to see smaller parks. We've tried to do that. They want that urban plaza not to be an empty grass median. It shows that on the model, so we'll have to fix that for the model, but we're not envisioning that. The Transportation Policy Board, agrees with the need for a larger East Washington corridor study and the new street network. And they've also asked us to map the Parkside extension to connect Mayfair with Easttown. I'll show you that when we come back and talk about the maps when you have some questions. And then the Housing Strategy Committee recommended keeping the LR and LMR use designation in that East Springs area, but noting that it's still really hard to get underrepresented communities and Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities into homeownership, and that's still a challenge, and that the plan should start looking at more policy recommendations to make this area indeed more welcoming. So that was some of that input. Our timeline, here we are. October, we're kind of finishing up with going through visits with other BCCs. And then we're going to start working on drafting the actual plan and some of the recommendations, finishing up the racial equity and social justice analysis, and then having some phase 3 public meetings in November so that we can kind of wrap this thing up and get it introduced in December. And that's our plan. And with that, we have some discussions, but they are also on the memo. So I'm not sure if it might just be best to go back to the map or start with any of the questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca. I don't see that we have any registrants for public comment. So assuming that is still correct, and I'm looking for Heather here, I assume that that's still correct. We will then move on to questions of staff. Are there questions of staff? I mean, this is a lot of information, a lot to digest. So please, if you do have questions, please raise those.
As you're thinking, Chairperson Zellers, one of the questions that Alder Halverson has been asking us to look at is thinking about the residential uses and the strict residential uses versus being more flexible with community mixed use areas. So just to kind of let the plan commissioners know, that's some input that we've had from Alder Halverson, is that he would like to see some of those medium residential and low residential moved into mixed use categories. But we think that we'd like to push those mostly towards East Washington Avenue.
Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, just great appreciation to staff for a very inspiring, a lot of work and a very visionary plan here. So I just really want to make sure that any comments or questions that I have are framed with a great deal of admiration for what you're doing, and also the fact that I'm the newest Plan Commission member. So I'm going to ask some questions that are mainly to educate myself. But the first one is, I guess I could ask a couple here. I don't know, but I don't want to get in the way of other people. But you get a recommendation like smaller commercial buildings would be useful to the community. What are your tools to bring forth that kind of result? And let me just frame that in a little bit larger question. When I read the staff report, there's tremendously admirable guiding principles, particularly with regard to equity and social justice. But there felt like a little disconnect between that, and then now we jump right into building heights. So is there going to be a place in the plan that explains how the specific recommendations, how they might help further the guiding principles, if you see what I'm saying? So that general question is on my mind. And then let me just throw two other little ones in there. You're doing some proactive zoning, and you're doing some maximum building height. And I'm not that familiar with the zoning categories, but does your maximum building height correspond to the maximum building height that is in that proposed zoning? Or would people be coming in with a zoning that, say, allows 6 stories, while this plan suggests 12 stories? So we'll be then getting presumably a lot of conditional uses, and requests for something that does not fit within the zoning. So I guess that's a lot of questions.
Sure.
Thank you,
Commissioner Fidesz.
Rebecca, do you want to take this?
Absolutely. You are spot on with trying to take those guiding principles and turn them into maps. Doesn't work, right? It's a problem with how we kind of come up with zoning and land uses. And I think that the next stage of what our team is working on is looking at some of those policy recommendations and specifically actually ideas from maybe our Economic Development Committee members tonight on what are some of the tools that economic development has. And we've been meeting with economic development staff as well, because there's a land use, but there's these other things that we want people to keep in mind as they move forward. We also have to be very careful of the overpromising and under-delivering dilemma of, saying that our plan is going to do all of these wonderful things, but we only have so many tools in the land use bucket that we can use to do those things. So what our plan and the recommendations that will follow, kind of this next step, we'll try to look at what are, and you'll hear some great ones in the South Madison plan coming up, right? About how they're saying some policy recommendations to, are there things like the Black Business Hub that we're doing on South Park Street as an example, that, are there incubators or other types of entrepreneurial spaces that the city can help, support, and whether it's financial or through grants or through other support to help some of those things happen, to try to get a larger group of entrepreneurs to be able to have opportunities in this area. So those are things that we still have to knit together, but we want to make sure that we're always still keeping those principles in mind, even as we come up with maps that are very kind of different in terms of how they work. Your other question about proactive zoning, I think, is also right on. We have these, we can only do so much with proactive zoning, and many of the land use categories do have heights that are higher. And Heather Stouter, maybe you can help me. I think RMX has a limit of 5 stories without a conditional use. I could be wrong. I am not my friends in development review that know all of those things.
Heather?
But
did you want Heather to comment on that, Rebecca?
that is correct. The RMX district has a conditional use threshold of 5 stories. So anything over and above 5 stories would still require a conditional use approval.
Right. But what's helpful, though, even with the proactive zoning, is it also then wouldn't require a zoning change on top of that. So then it's only a conditional use that goes through the plan commission approval process and doesn't require those next steps at Common Council like a rezoning would. So we're trying to take that step kind of out of the process. And that's where proactive rezoning can really be a tool to say, hey, we want development on East Washington Avenue. We want redevelopment in the mall area. We think they're underutilized and ready to go. So let's take as many of those obstacles out of the way as we can, knowing that if we do want more heights, we'll still have some conditional use review. I think, does that answer your questions, Commissioner Fernandez?
Well, partially, again, this could reflect my greenness here, but we had a proposal before for a rezoning and a conditional use. The rezone was to a zone that had a maximum height of threshold, as you put it, of 6 stories, and the proposal was for 18 stories. And my feeling kind of strongly was we've gone beyond the limits of conditional use when we approve something that is 3 times as high as the threshold. I mean, if somebody came in with 7 stories or 8 stories, now that may not be correct. But that was my feeling, is that this is kind of a whole other animal. And I feel the same way here. If a district has 5-story threshold, but the neighborhood plan recommends even 12-story maximum, we've created, for me, a little bit of a quandary in, what happens if somebody comes in with 12 or even 14 stories, and the zoning says one thing, but the comprehensive plan seems to be suggesting something at quite a different scale.
Heather, did you want to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Zellers. Commissioner Fernandez, you raise a really good point. I think that it has to do with the current construct of our zoning code. We simply don't have a menu of zoning districts exceeding 5 stories as a permitted use. That is really the highest height that's allowable as a permitted use without that extra level of review by the Plan Commission. And that 5-story threshold is found in some of the employment districts, the suburban employment, traditional employment. So as an example, right along in the Capital East District, right on East Washington Avenue, close to downtown, where we have 12 and 14-story buildings, those are in the zoning district traditional employment. And really the Plan Commission and the council, if necessary, when approving those conditional uses or development proposals, leaned heavily on adopted plans in order to find that the proposed heights were consistent with adopted plans. And so I completely understand your point. If we had a menu of zoning districts that had, more height to them beyond that 5-story threshold, those would be probably more important or more pertinent here in many of these areas. At this point, we don't.
Again, you did raise a very good point, Commissioner, and maybe that's something we will want to look at going forward, is to have some districts with additional height to make it clearer what the desire is and for various areas. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you. I do appreciate the maps and all the work that went into this plan. I just wanted to reiterate that from Commissioner Fernandez. And I just had a question about the parks, the existing and the future parks. And forgive me if it was mentioned while you were presenting on that. Yeah, seeing the slide would be great. Thanks. I was just curious if some of this would be conservation park, I'm assuming, if it's closer to the stream. And then I was just curious on if there would be, these parks would be more focused on like activities with soccer fields or general fields, or if that's even mentioned in the plan. That was all. Thank you.
Sure. We've gotten some indication from park staff that they're interested in this area, in the Mayfair Park expansion area, that because of the kind of concrete batch plant that's there, there's some interesting topography that they could see be useful for maybe something like a cycle track or something. So like that's one of the reasons. And then because of the neighborhood that's there, that could be sort of an interesting expansion of Mayfair Park. This area along at the southern kind of part, this purple area, the Parks Division is looking for some recreational uses in that area. If we look back, I'm sorry, I'm switching around, but if we look back at the old maps, there's 27 acres kind of down there and another 20 on this side. So I think that there could be room for all of those things. We also heard from the Board of Parks Commissioners that they're interested in kind of conserving some of the uplands, conserving some of the sedge meadows and other of the natural plants that are there. They're also concerned about some of the PFAS, and I said that wrong, that are in that, potentially in that creek. So wanting to think about how all of that goes together as well. So we aren't going to get too specific because Parks Division is very clear on their process about how they like to design parks and work through a park design process. But we want to give them lots of opportunity, knowing that there's some different needs. 2 to 5 acre neighborhood parks in some areas, larger community recreation parks in others. And I think they all see, there's a really great little conservation park just to the south of the railroad tracks, this green area right there that I guess is like nobody knows about. It's this really great secret park. So they're looking at kind of trying to fill in lots of needs in this old area because, except for Rindall and the park stuff, the railroad tracks, there's really nothing. And if we're expecting 16,000 people that could live here, we really need to have pretty robust parks. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And you did mention some of the activities. But yeah, I was surprised there was a little bit more park space in that area than that I'd previously known about. And I'd kind of like to check out that little conservation pocket park. So I'm really happy to see a lot more parkland, dispersed throughout this area. Could really use it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do you have any further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. I had a question about the land uses around the interstate. It feels like the general commercial kind of serves as a buffer between the interstate and the residential uses. So I was wondering about the medium residential in that southeast corner. Is there any concern that there would be negative noise impacts or other kinds of impacts from being so close to the interstate for that medium residential chunk there?
Sure. I think we saw a lot less concern in that area. It's a lot further down in, so it's a lot lower, and the interstate's actually quite high there. So there's a really large elevation difference, and because it was so kind of close to those parks and kind of, it felt like it was a good transition maybe into some open space. Again, we're showing this red area down there, which, there's part of me that doesn't like that we're showing red there, and maybe that's something that we shouldn't be showing, because we do think that there should be parks area down in here, and we reflect that pretty strongly in some of our other areas. But we wanted it to kind of be a little bit of a transition from the general commercial into that parks area. And we think nestled down in there, it's a really deep lot. It's hard to develop a lot of anything down there, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I have a question. Heather, this is probably for you. That area that was being discussed to the west of the existing main mall area is possibly CMU, and as opposed to what's the recommendation now?
Medium residential.
Medium residential. Can you explain without regard to height, why that would be more flexible, CMU, as I think Alder Halverson was suggesting? What added flexibility would that gain?
Heather, do you want me to take? Oh, Heather, do you have this one?
Sure, I can try that. I think CMU would support a variety of different zoning districts, not just residential districts, but also commercial and mixed use districts. I think it's kind of a catch-22 though, because if something is zoned mixed use, it's a bit more difficult, as we know, to do purely residential buildings. And we're dealing with a lot of issues citywide where we have vacant storefronts and a difficulty really achieving the commercial needs. And so I think from the staff perspective, we're trying to concentrate commercial and mixed use in smaller areas than they are today. And we think that the market for purely residential probably would actually be quite strong, but it isn't as flexible. You know, if you're looking at a menu of land uses that could be possible, a mixed use future land use designation is going to be more flexible than a residential designation.
Thanks, that helps. That was my question.
Okay, thank you, Alder. Commissioner Cantrell.
Again, this is a great job on the planning process here, and the changes that you show, I think, are right on. And I guess I agree with the land use designations you show. I did kind of a question like the Alder, the area just west of the main mall area. Yes, in that area. But I do think that we're going to see a significant amount of residential in this area, and probably in that area specifically higher density. So I guess we may want to look at that a little bit more closely, but overall, I think you've done a really good job of identifying the land uses. And you asked a lot of questions, and I don't know if we're ready to start responding to the questions.
I would say so. Yes, there are a lot of questions. So yeah, let's get into.
Okay.
If you've got a perspective, go ahead.
Sure. The preservation of the view shed from High Crossing, I guess I'm not in favor of that. I think that that really reduces the economic vitality of this area, and I think that I think that in driving into the city from the east, the East Washington corridor, you'll see the Capitol eventually, and I think maybe it's Stoughton Road, or I can't remember exactly when, but that's the view shed that's I think impressive for me, and I think from people in traveling. But on the High Crossing Boulevard area, we're preserving it for a few people, but for the most part, we're limiting the economic vitality of this proposed area, and I don't agree with that. I think that we should go with the recommendations you have in this plan. The height limits, I guess I'm generally supportive of the height limitations that you show along the East Washington corridor and kind of throughout the other areas, the 5, 6, and 8 stories, as well as the 12 stories where the mall area is, because I think that you'll need that height to provide the impetus for that area to be redeveloped. So I guess I'm supportive of that. The proactive rezoning, I can see your point in rezoning the mall area and the area along the East Washington corridor. And since I go out to this area quite often, about 3 or 4 times a week, because I go to the Princeton Club, which is proposed for multiple family residential now. But anyway, rezoning those 3 houses along Parkside, I totally agree. That area, obviously, they need to be notified and indicate, what their feelings are. But the highest and best use for that area is something that overlooks the park and actually has some density that I think is appropriate for that area. But the proposed streets, I think, again, I can see your logic in the official mapping of the streets south and north of the mall area, and the Parkside and the area. Let's see, over by that area by Hy-Vee. I can see that as well, and over by, I guess it's Coles and that area. But I think you're right on target with these recommendations, and I guess I'm very supportive of what your thinking process is.
So Commissioner Cantrell, you're in agreement with what is being suggested to officially map, but not the dotted lines where it says discuss official mapping.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, that would be my point of view.
Okay. And did you have any comments about land use, the 1A and B? I don't think I caught you mentioning anything about those. One is, should there be low, medium residential areas to provide opportunities for small scale missing middle housing, or should the plan provide smaller scale neighborhood mixed use in these areas?
Let me think about that one. I guess okay. I'd like to hear the other commission members. Also, I'd like to ask staff what would qualify as the low residential. Would that be 2-family, single family, townhouses, 4 units? And is that what you're envisioning in that area, or what's the concept?
I think we are envisioning, a variety of, smaller scale multifamily housing. So it's not, the high rises. It's not necessarily the kind of 5 stories that we see kind of going up everywhere, but it's trying to find a place that could create a small neighborhood. Mm-hmm. All of the kids that would live east of Zier Road would actually go to the Sun Prairie School District. And all of the kids that live west of Zier Road would go to the Madison School District. And we had a meeting with both of those school districts to talk about what are the implications of that, because we know in other parts of the city that's a issue, right? Kids that live in the same neighborhood go to different schools. And so we wanted to create enough of that type of housing that at least the kids that live in that neighborhood we didn't want to put some of the low residential on one side and some of the low residential on the other. We were trying to sort of keep that all together, because it not that medium residential isn't family friendly housing, because it absolutely should be and should be designed to be family friendly, but we know that those lower residential uses are more family friendly. So how do we keep them kind of together to create a neighborhood that then would all go to school together?
And so in terms of the number of units, you're thinking 4, did you say? 4 to 6?
I think that I can't remember exactly what that land use category has, but I think there's a range of, I want to say, kind of a limit of about 3 stories tall, and a range of that kind of scale. It could be a number of anything. That housing type is really hard to do. It's still really hard to do. Mm-hmm. So we were trying to give some incentive in this area now that could be filled with amenities and filled with things to do, that then it could be developed in that manner, that up to 2 to 3 stories, different types of housing units. And we can explore, if the plan commissioners are interested in us really stressing one kind or another, I'd love to hear that, and we can work on ways to try to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess to respond to your the information you provided, I guess in that area, I'd like to see a concept of what you're thinking. I don't object to it. And I think having a range of housing in this area is important, because I think we're going to see a lot of multi-story apartments, and having an additional mix of housing, lower density, I think would be necessary. But I guess, but I would like to see like the concept you're thinking, and having that lower density next to the proposed parks in that general area, which would just be south of East Springs Drive, I think makes some sense. So I guess I think that I'm generally supportive of that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Heck.
Thank you. I just wanted to add my voice to what Commissioner Cantrell said throughout his entire remarks, but also in that last remark. My first inclination was that the low-medium residential area looks like a bit of an island, and it might be difficult to coherently develop that area into something desirable, even 2 to 6, 8 units, 3 stories. But then when I heard Commissioner Cantrell mention the park, that kind of made me more interested in the idea. And I think the area would need an identity of some sort, which is, I think, what we were hearing. I agree with that. It could be focused on adjacent parkland, but just some low-medium housing surrounded by denser housing doesn't sound so pleasant to me. But I think with the concept, I think it could work. So I tend to support that. And I did agree with the other remarks that were made. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Just one quick question. If I recall from our review of the Odana plan, if there was proactive rezoning to RMX, would that prohibit one-story buildings?
Thank you. Sorry, I had to unmute myself to check on my mother coughing in the other room. Everything's fine. Yes, I do believe that would prohibit RMX, but I would like to just confirm that with Heather, just to make sure.
Heather?
Yes, that was one of the main parts of the conversation. We were talking with the Plan Commission about, well, where do we really need to ensure some intensity or some height? And so utilizing proactive rezoning as a tool to ensure multi-story buildings. And that is the case that in the RMX district, the minimum building height is 2.
Great. Thank you. Other than that, I will echo a lot of the same comments from Commissioner Cantrell and Alder Heck. I agree. I don't think that the view shed of the Capitol up from High Crossing is particularly important to me. People should keep their eyes on the road and not on the Capitol in the distance. And I'm supportive of the proactive rezoning to RMX, absolutely. Other than that, I just had, a follow-up on the urban plaza area, and just kind of curious. I mean, it's a very cool concept, but kind of hard, to wrap my head around how that could be developed by, it seems like, it'd have to be either the city doing it or like one master developer and kind of like setting aside that space. So I like the concept, but think it would probably have to be pretty flexible because that would take a lot of coordination and advanced planning.
I think the reason we think it might actually be possible here is because there's one landowner, or there's like one entity. Actually, there's several. I should correct myself. There's actually a couple of different landowners in the mall. JCPenney owns parts, and some of the big department stores owned their parcel, and then the mall itself is owned by CBL. So there's some odd development patterns, but it's all in essence kind of one big development site. And that's why we think if we wanted to try to really create a, that kind of urban experience of a boulevard with activities in the middle that lots of us see in other cities that are like where all this stuff happens that everybody wants to go to. If that's going to happen, we feel like that could happen here more than a lot of other places. And I think that's why we wanted to preserve that idea that could happen. It might not happen. And maybe Independence Lane just kind of gets extended down, into something else. But we think this is the one place where that could happen. So we want to promote it and try to encourage redevelopment that would take that form because, you don't get that many chances. So we wanted to try to grab it while we could.
Yeah, absolutely. I think redevelopment of a mall in particular, where people are adjusting their kind of the way that they shop, when you think of like how Hilldale changed, that kind of reminds me of this. So the only other thing I'll add is while you have the official mapping slide up, I agree to prioritize just the solid lines. Those are certainly the key connections. I don't think it's necessary to officially map the dotted lines. Those I could see maybe adjusting a bit. So that's all I have for comments. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Solheim. Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, is the RMX the only area that would have the minimum height?
It isn't, I believe, and I don't have my zoning code right by me, believe it or not. I really should, but the TSS district also has, I believe, a 2-story height minimum. And I will double check that and get back to plan commissioners on that just to make sure. But the RMX district, I don't believe it's the only district, but it's a pretty short list.
CCT? Do you know? Anyway.
No, CCT does allow for 1-story buildings.
Because that, as you know, has been a persistent concern of mine, that in areas where we're looking for more density and we have the opportunity for that, is that we allow single story instead of having some kind of minimum on the height in areas like next to East Washington, where it seems that we would want to look to buildings that are taller than 1 story. Heather, go ahead.
I was able to phone a friend, actually, thanks to Tim Parks for looking up this. So RMX is the only district that has that minimum of 2. It's not the traditional shopping street or TSS district. Now, not to get too confusing here, but we do have some urban design districts that aren't in the zoning code, but are urban design districts that do have minimum heights. In the Capital East District and Urban Design District 8, the minimum height is often 3 stories. And so there are some areas that have another regulatory layer over on top of the base zoning. So I just wanted to mention that.
Nothing here.
Nothing here. Right.
Well, that's a concern that I have. Continue to do potentially 1 story next to East Washington when there is redevelopment. Alder Heck.
Thanks. Sorry, just a question, I think probably for Rebecca. The upper left little RMX area along East Washington looks as if it's relatively close to some lower density housing. Was there discussion of that with the community and stakeholders in the engagement process? And why did that RMX come forth?
We have been talking and showing a CMU for a while in that area. We think that because it's so close to Madison College, it's right on a BRT stop at Mendota there. And it's sort of this large parking lot that's in front of Hy-Vee and the Madison Plaza Hotel there, that we just thought it was a perfect spot to have some additional density along the avenue that was sort of buffered by some of that commercial, if you will, buffered by a little bit of that commercial to the south of it from those neighbors. We invited Mayfair Park residents to many of our meetings. I think several of them came. I haven't heard concern about it.
Mm-hmm. and the neighborhood across East Washington?
Again, invited. I'm not sure who all came to some of our meetings, but we didn't hear concern about that one. We heard concern about other places in Heights, and actually that's one places where we didn't get much comment at all during the process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That not a lack of attempts to engage, but I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that might be something to keep an eye on as things move forward.
Yes, sometimes people come late to the process when they see things, right, that they're concerned about. So yes, well, I'll keep that in mind. It's a good thought.
Thank you.
Okay, I have heard comment with agreement among a smaller group of commissioners about basically the questions 1 through 3 on the memo. I would like to get a sense if we could go back to, if we could take the share away for a minute, please. Thank you. Among plan commissioners, I would like to get a sense whether you agree with what has been expressed. For example, the view corridor, no, not saving that. The community mixed use areas be 8 to 12 stories. Proactive rezoning, the discussion there, and the transportation mapping. So if I could see, a thumbs up on what's been expressed so far of people, if plan commissioners agree. So yes, I'm seeing yes. Okay, so now what I would like to do then is ask, because really number 4 and beyond are more economic development. And I would like to find out if any of our attendees from the Economic Development Commission have any input on the questions that are more in their area of expertise. And I'm looking for raised hands to see if there are any comments. I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I'm going to assume that our Economic Development Committee folks don't have any comments on those questions. Rebecca, have you gotten from the Plan Commission what you were hoping to get in terms of your questions?
Yes, except for one clarification on the height against BRT, just because I heard you, Chair Zeller, say about the kind of the taller community mixed use be 8 to 12 versus 6. We're showing 6 right now in all of the CMU community mixed areas. Do you as a commission think we should go higher on East Washington, even if it has a community mixed use designation? So do you think we should go that 8 to 12 along the avenue, kind of that whole stretch on the southern on the southern aspect of it, or should we just stick with the land use categories?
I was hearing the taller. Yes, I'm seeing some nods. Yes.
Okay,
yes,
I was just confused, so I just wanted to double check on that. So
okay,
I have yes, but a question next to it. So thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Otherwise, I feel very comfortable about thinking about coming up with a more concept for that low residential to kind of show what kind of mixed use house, what kind of housing mix would be. That was very helpful. No, I think we have a lot of good information to move on to our next phase. So I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. And with that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is agenda item 3, Legistar 67570, Planning Division Staff Update on the South Madison Plan and October 2022 final attachment of the Town of Madison. And I am going to split those two because they have a little bit different nuance to them. And because I think that the final attachment of the Town of Madison might provide some additional context information for the plan concepts, I'm going to ask that we have a presentation or information on that first. And we will have that from Angela of Puerta of city staff. So Angela, could you
Yes.
give us the information that you have, please?
Yeah, of course. So good evening, everyone. My name is Angela Puerta, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So are you seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so tonight I'm going to present, this is just an informational presentation about the Town of Madison Attachment Communications Plan. So right now we are in the implementation part of it. So an internal team, this was a joint effort by the City of Madison, the City of Fitchburg, and the Town of Madison as well, to create a plan that was reviewed and accepted by the mayor around a year ago. And this came out because of the cooperative plan that was signed by the 3 municipalities in early 2000. So just a brief overview of the attachment. So the map that you're seeing here is just a glimpse at the area that will be attached to either the City of Madison or the City of Fitchburg. So the City of Madison is going to welcome almost 5,000 residents. So according to the Census 2022, we will be welcoming 4,846 new residents, 2,407 additional housing units, and that's a total of 835 additional parcels. According to the InfoUSA data, approximately 309 businesses will be part of the City of Madison. That's starting on October 31st, 2022. So there was an early attachment that was last year, November 1st, if I recall correctly. The fire department, emergency medical services, and building inspections are serving the community right now. So there was this early attachment. And also, as you can see here in the map, the area is very fragmented right now. So the communications plan laid out some of the strategies and the communication resources that the city could offer in order to target these geographic areas. So we have 3 separate geographic locations, and those are very different in terms of demographics. So we have in the south side, great number of Latinx, Hispanic residents. In the north side here, let me see if I can use the laser, Sherman Avenue, Fordham Avenue, there is some Tibetan population. So we have to be very mindful about how we let residents know about this attachment in terms of reaching out to underrepresented populations, which in this community, it's higher than the city as a whole. So let's talk about the population makeup of the town. So this is according to the Census 2020. So the white population, it's a little bit over half in the town of Madison. So in 2010, it was around 55%. So that's been a decrease. It presents a decrease. And the majority of the town that are non-white are Black, accounting for 13% of the town of Madison compared to the city with only 7.3%. So the majority of the Hispanic and Latino population presents 27.1%, which is a huge difference compared to the city as a whole. So we have to be mindful in terms of language barriers. In ACS data 2019, around 32% of this population doesn't speak English very well, and the vast majority of those residents speak Spanish. So we're currently working on how we address those communities, and I'll go later about the communication resources that we have been implementing since we launched the campaign. The communications campaign was launched in May of this year. So talking about the socioeconomic characteristics, so the average household income of the town of Madison residents is approximately 30% or lower than the average of the city as a whole, with $42,000 as average. The living below poverty level, it's roughly the same, with 16.8% in the town of Madison. However, the housing tenure, it presents a difference from the city as a whole. Only 35.7% of residents in the town of Madison own their home, compared to the city with 50.6%. So that also presents a barrier in terms of communications. There is a lot of turnover in the town of Madison compared to the city. And just a big overview of the awareness campaign timeline. So our group launched the website around May, and there was a press release also in collaboration with the city of Fitchburg and the town. So we've always been collaborating with these other two municipalities. So we have hired multiple community navigators. We have had various media newspapers, articles, and we've worked with various organizations to help us work on these communications. But the idea is that we implement all the communications recommendations until the end of the attachment, which would be the final attachment on October 31st, 2022. And there will be just, a little bit of time for the maintenance of the website that we launched in May. So some of the resources that the communications plan team is working on right now. So the Town of Madison website is pretty much, it's a one-stop shop that shares all the information in a single platform that includes process timeline, history, background, etc., and also ways for people to communicate to us. So there is an interactive map, as I showed at the beginning, and also there is a hotline in multiple languages. So there is people can call and leave a voicemail, and it could be either English, Spanish, Tibetan, or Mandarin, which are the most spoken languages in the town. There is also educational videos in these multiple languages, targeted media campaign. So we hired Design Craft through an RFP last May. So they've been targeting some media ads to that particular location, only within the Town of Madison area. We have sent mailings, postcards, and letters to residents. We've had radio ads, and you can read all this list, text message alerts, etc. One good piece about how we're doing this outreach is through community navigators. We think that that's one of the easiest and more approachable ways to connect with the community, especially with those who don't have easy access to the internet. So we have 4 community navigators right now. They are in the town distributing fact sheets, which is a 5-page document that talks about all the service changes that the town is going to experience after the final attachment, flyers, yard signs, and resource guides. So this is pretty much just, a brief illustration of what they've been distributing in the community. So we had a public information meeting around 2 weeks ago, and we've received various phone calls. So actually, the hotline has been the second most popular communication tool, apart from the website. We've received approximately 10 calls so far, in 6 emails, and the majority of the concerns, and this I'm adding some of the questions and concerns that we heard from the public information meeting, is about property taxes. People are concerned about how much it is going to raise, what the difference will be. Unfortunately, there is not a clear answer so far by the assessor's office. But we've been inviting all these agencies to give a direct response to the community. So where the polling place will be, the trash collection, building inspection services. That's also one of the major issues. So because now they are providing the service, and the mobile home park presents a lot of building code violations. So some of those mobile homes don't have the minimum safety hazards conditions that would allow them to live in a decent way. So their building inspections is doing their best to help them meet the minimum requirements without enforcing that much, because of the fact that this is a very, very vulnerable population. So around 90% of the residents in the mobile home park are Latinx or Hispanic. So other questions were about sewer and water service changes, street reconstruction, and other special assessments. And also because so many of these folks don't know or have a hard time reading maps. So there's just questions about clarifying which municipality they will be served or living in. So what's next? We've had so far only one public information meeting, and this was a virtual setting. So right now we are working on an in-person public information meeting at Penn Park. So we'll have approximately 10 to 12 agencies, PD staff there answering questions. That will be on October 14th from 5 to 7 p.m. We will do another round of mailers to our residents and property owners. And something that I didn't mention is that our team, the communications team, has contacted many of the organizations and even businesses to let them know that this attachment is happening if they have any questions. So we can do our best to answer those questions. And I think that would be it. It was a very high overview of the communications plan implementation. So I'm going to open up for questions if you have any questions.
Thank you. So yes, this provides a little bit of context. Let's take questions about this attachment. Then we will go on to hearing about the South Madison plan, and then we will hear from our registrants before we go to questions about the South Madison plan. So that's the direction that we're going to take. So do you have any questions in regard to the Town of Madison attachment that was just described? Commissioner Fernandez.
Hi, thanks. Just again, a wonderful presentation. And the one thing that caught my attention is that it ends on October 31st, 2022. My experience with a lot of projects is that people only begin paying attention about the time that the bulldozers show up, and we definitely need to continue that communication into beyond that date, because I think there will be a strong need for all kinds of communication even after that date passes.
Thank you. Alder Albaras.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Angela, thank you so much for the the presentation. I know that the annexation of the town of Madison is such a big sort of topic and issue for all things city right now. So this is sort of a helpful and sort of timely discussion that you're having to let us know some of that sort of change management and communication planning that's occurring. It's somewhat of like an in the weeds question, but the navigators that you mentioned that have been brought on, are those city staff, or is that a vendor or a third party we're utilizing for that? If you could just speak to that briefly, and then that would be helpful.
Angela, you need to raise your hand.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I was unmuting, and for some reason it didn't allow me to unmute.
Yeah. Just stay unmuted until we're done with this part.
Okay. So the community navigators are part of the community, so they are not city staff. So we had kind of like an RFP process. So people fill out a survey, and we selected those who had some knowledge about the town. Also, 2 of them are bilingual, which was one of our priorities, to have people who can communicate, especially in Spanish, to this population. So yeah, they are just regular residents who are taking this like part-time job, and by part-time I mean they are working between 10, 13 hours a week. They started to work since September, and the idea is to have them the next 3 months working, getting the word out, and they will be back next year during the spring time, so we can have them out in the community. Because of winter, we have to pause their work.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, Alder? Yes. Okay. Very good. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, we will move on then to the presentation about the South Madison plan. Jeff Gerger, I think, is going to be doing that. Jeff.
Good evening. Just let me put I'll leave my hand up for now. I'm going to be giving a presentation on the South Madison plan, where we're at and where we're going. So our study area is the area south of Winger Creek, the area generally north of the Beltline, east of Fish Hatchery Road, and west of Lake Monona. The Alliant Energy Center is excluded from this study area because at the time of the resolution, when it was introduced way back in 2019, the city policymakers felt it was not an efficient use of limited planning resources to plan for an area that recently had gone through a public planning effort that was led by Dane County. So in hindsight, we didn't know about the pandemic. It was felt that the Alliant Energy Center would be well underway with their redevelopment, and that has not happened. But still, it's excluded from our study area. Something else that happened along the way, we were working towards our normal all-encompassing neighborhood type plan. When the pandemic hit, it was decided to take a break from public portions of the planning effort. And during that period of time, we heard feedback from the community that this plan needed to be different. It needed to be more nimble and able to react to things that are going on in South Madison today. Things like displacement and gentrification, buying up of properties, assembling of properties for future development. So in consultation with the mayor's office, it was decided to refocus this plan into an action plan. This action plan has 3 guiding principles, and those are anti-displacement, gentrification, community wealth building, and opportunities to thrive. Another thing we did, we kind of skinnied up the document and have a limited number of chapters in the plan, but the chapters in the plan focused on economic development, housing, land use, transportation, and parks, equitable access and community capacity building, and the Park Street corridor. This slide goes over some of the top community issues and concerns that we heard throughout this planning effort. Number one, concerns about gentrification and displacement, the need to preserve single-family homes in South Madison, and have additional opportunities for growing community wealth, as well as affordable housing, preserving the mobile home park, and providing spaces for neighborhood serving retail. We also heard a lot of feedback about needing a community center, a neighborhood gathering space, a place for youth and senior programming. Affordable and quality childcare is important. Improving the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, extending the Cannonball Path, creating north-south bike route, east-west bike routes. In general, improving connectivity between neighborhoods. There are some major barriers in South Madison to connectivity. Those include railroad and other major road corridors like South Park Street, John Nolan Drive, Fish Hatchery Road. Improve access to parks, need for amenities in those parks, upgraded equipment, especially in the town parks that will be coming into the city of Madison. And again, we heard programming for youth and seniors. Improving lighting for pedestrians overall, and then transit service, more frequent transit service, and service for third shift workers. I'm going to dive right into the maps, and at the end I've got 5 topic areas where we'd appreciate some feedback. What we're looking at here is the future land use map. The underlying colors come straight from the GFLU map and the comp plan. The areas that have a black outline are areas that we're recommending in the plan for change. And one of the items where we'd like to get feedback on tonight are these changes in the future land use map. Some specific areas we want to talk about is what we're coining the Olin Triangle. It's the area north of Olin and west of John Nolan. The comp plan currently calls for an employment land use. The recommendation in the plan is regional mixed use. Going counterclockwise here, in the old Thorstad area, the Thorstad Chevrolet site is roughly here. The comp plan is designating that area for regional mixed use. And the plan is recommending change to low-medium residential and low residential. The reason behind that will become clearer as I progress in the presentation here. A couple of other changes. This is more of a cleanup item. The comp plan for any parks under 2 acres showed the underlying land use as low residential. We just want to clean that up to show Heifetz Park and a possible expansion of Heifetz Park as park. Showing an employment area here to changing to medium residential, and that'll become a little bit clearer when we look at the concept plans, as well as this area here, suggested change from low residential to medium residential. One of the areas where we specifically want some input, the comp plan kind of splits the block that's bounded by Hughes Place on the north and Badger Road on the south. The comp plan splits it between community mixed use and medium residential. The plan is recommending to change that entire block to community mixed use to offer the ability for a mix of uses within that block, which is what it is today, is essentially a mix of uses. This change here is, again, a little bit of a cleanup of the comp plan map. It shows it as employment. This is the Madison College site in the fire department, Station 6. Plan is suggesting a change from employment to special institutional. Madison Mobile Home Park, one of the most affordable areas, affordable housing within the study area and within the city of Madison. We heard a lot of feedback about the value of keeping that a mobile home park. And one of the ways that potentially could assist in that is to change it from low, medium residential to low residential as far as land use goes. This is, again, is a cleanup from the comp plan. It showed the Badger Rock Middle School as general commercial. We're showing it as special institutional in the plan. And then a couple of other areas of change from general commercial to employment and from low, medium residential to employment. Again, these areas are generally, they're not residential. And so it was felt that it made sense to change them to employment, the surrounding suggested land use. Kind of going hand in hand, the land use map, this map, the maximum building height map, and then the next one, zoning, kind of go hand in hand. The plan is recommending, again, some changes, or actually there is no height map for South Madison. It's felt that having one would be helpful to go along with the land use and the zoning mapping. Again, this Olin Triangle, there was the McGrath proposal for that 18-story building. The plan for that, or the South Madison plan is recommending a max building height of 12 stories for approximately 2/3 of that site, and then stepping down to a max of 8 stories as you get closer to the creek and closer to the established neighborhood, Bay Creek neighborhood to the northwest. Something else that we heard during the public input portions of this project were folks did not want South Park Street to be the next East Washington as far as building heights go. And that kind of directly competes with, putting your density along major transportation corridors and transit corridors, which South Park Street is been talked about for a future BRT route. So the building height, max building height map right now is recommending generally max building heights of 5 stories, with some areas max building height of 3. And then at the West Badger South Park Street intersection, which is a gateway into South Madison and gateway into Madison, the building heights are recommended for a max of 8 stories. And then there are a couple of areas that are recommended for 12-story max. The Rimrock Road interchange area with the Beltline, and then John Nolan Drive, just opposite of the Alliant Energy Center. Zoning, the plan is not recommending any proactive rezoning for City of Madison parcels. So the colors or the categories for the zoning for Madison parcels are what they currently are zoned. However, we have a number of parcels coming into the city in about a little over a year from now, from the town of Madison. So the plan is designating what those properties should be rezoned to correlate to Madison zoning from Dane County zoning. Generally, they are consistent with what the areas around them are zoned. I just wanted to point out right now we have a placeholder of agriculture in for the Madison Mobile Home Park. We are working with zoning staff to determine if that area can be slotted into the planned development mobile home park zoning category. That would be the PD MHP. I guess we're trying to see if there needs to be changes recommended to that category to make that work. But so right now it's a placeholder, but as we get closer to introduction, likely that will change to that PD MHP zoning category. We're showing a future street network, and these generally relate to our focus area concepts, which we'll get to in a minute here. But we're showing some priority street connections and then secondary street connections to, again, help with improving connectivity between neighborhoods within South Madison. one of the priority street connections we see is an extension of Buick Street through the Village on Park site, and then through the site just west of Village on Park. That would connect the east side of South Park Street and those neighborhoods directly to Lincoln Elementary School on the west. Then the other priority street connection is extension of North Avenue across to Fish Hatchery Road. This was a recommendation of the 2005 South Madison Plan, and we felt that it was a recommendation that needed to be carried forward into this planning effort. Just again, to improve connectivity, if you're headed west, instead of heading south or north to get west, you can head right over to Fish Hatchery Road. We do recognize that it would require a crossing of the railroad, and we know those are difficult, but we believe that this crossing has a lot of merit. Another secondary street connection that's being proposed is an overpass of the Beltline of Perry Street. Feel that would be a great connection for these neighborhoods north of the Beltline to employment uses south of the Beltline. So those are generally what we're looking at there for future street connections. We have a pedestrian bicycle network. This is kind of a busy map, but I'll try to do my best explaining what's on it. We're showing existing off-street paths in blue, proposing a couple of off-street paths. The Cannonball extension is shown in green here near Wright Middle School. The other ped bike connection we're showing in the plan is a potential connection in the Capitol View neighborhood at Dane Street. Likely, this could be an on-grade connection. There is a fair bit of topography to the south here that would pose a challenge headed east, but as you head north, that grade levels out. So that would connect the Capitol View neighborhood to Penn Park. We heard from these residents that park access on this side of the railroad tracks is difficult. This would be one way to achieve that. We're also showing some on-street bike lanes or bike boulevards, a north-south connection on Fisher Street, east-west connection to Lincoln Elementary School on that extended Buick Street. Showing a couple of new or proposed locations for B-cycle, one up at the Thorstad site, and then one at Madison College. And then the map is also showing gaps in the sidewalk network. This orangish brown color is depicting areas where both sides of the street do not have sidewalk. The red is one side of the street does not have sidewalk. There's a recommendation in the plan for the engineering division to proactively fill gaps in the sidewalk based on their evaluation of need. So not all of these areas would get the gaps filled, but engineering would conduct a study to determine the highest priorities where those gaps should be filled. I mentioned focus area concepts a couple of times in the presentation. We have 3 focus areas that we provided concepts in the plan. The first one is the Village on Park focus area. We looked on both sides of Park Street, not just the Village on Park site. Then the Thorstad area, so here's the Thorstad, old Thorstad Chevrolet site, but it's more areas to the west, even going to Fish Hatchery Road. And then the third area is the Perry and Ann Street focus area. I'll quickly go through kind of highlights of the concepts. We're showing a site for the Urban League's Black-owned business hub on the corner of Hughes Place and Park, depicting the future parking structure that will help serve the parking needs of the hub as well as parking needs of Village on Park. Showing that Buick, a potential alignment for that Buick Street extension west to Cypress Way, Fisher Street extension down to Badger Road, A potential expansion of Penn Park to the south. We heard a lot of feedback from the community that Penn Park needs to be bigger and offer more recreational opportunities, and this is one potential way that that could occur. Just a note that this development would not occur unless that property owner would desire to redevelop the property, but we see these concepts as kind of a blueprint if development were to occur in the future. In this block, we're showing for land use, community mixed use. We're showing potential for a redeveloped a mixed use transit center. So a transit center that would potentially service BRT, structured parking, commercial on the first floor with potential residential above, opportunities for additional mixed use to the west, and then maybe some residential near Cypress Way and Hughes Place. Again, more of a mix of uses within the block, not necessarily all mixed use buildings. The Thorstad area, one of the most requested item or comment that we heard was there needs to be more opportunities for owner-occupied housing, especially single-family detached housing. We look at a number of areas within South Madison where that potentially could get accomplished. We settled on the Thorstad area mainly because doing it in this area would not displace any residential. There are businesses within this area, but redeveloping this site would not displace any residential or any residents of South Madison, and we could enlarge or develop an area for single-family residential. So we're showing a mix of single-family lots, small lots, single-family, 4,000 to 5,000 square foot lots, some cottage homes, 1,200 to 1,500 square foot homes, owner-occupied, and then some townhome or row home type buildings near the middle school, with some mixed use along Park Street. Those could have some neighborhood serving retail, showing an expansion of Heifetz Park, North Avenue extension, another mixed use node at Park Street and North Avenue. The final focus area is that Perry and Ann Street. We're showing that overpass, the one potential alignment of Perry Street over the Beltline. This would need further study and refinement from our traffic engineering colleagues if it were to move forward. Showing some opportunities for additional employment along Ann Street and the Beltline, and then transitioning back into this neighborhood with some low-medium residential and some medium residential adjacent to Madison College, as well as trying to reconnect the street grid in this area with a new north-south street here and an east-west street here. And finally, just getting into the areas where we'd appreciate some feedback tonight. As I mentioned before, the plan is proposing a number of changes to the comprehensive GFLU map for the Olin Triangle, the mobile home park, that Thorstad focus area, and then that area between Badger Road and Hughes Place. And to go along with that, we have the building height, maximum building height map, and the proposed Town of Madison zoning classifications. We'd also like some input on the future street network. If we've highlighted the correct streets that would be critical for that future street network. And then any comments you might have on the pedestrian and bicycle network improvements, and generally overall, any other comments that you might have. So I'll stop sharing my screen for now. I think there's some public comment and then a
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, and we will come back to questions. Now we will go to registrants. The first registrant is Helen Kitchell, District 13, Potter Street, Madison, neither support nor opposed and wishing to speak. Helen, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Helen, you are unmuted on our end. So maybe you have a mute button on a headset or a microphone. Let's try that again. Helen, you should see a prompt right now. I've seen that you were unmuted. Yep, you're unmuted. Now you're muted again. Okay, Helen, you are unmuted on Zoom. If you have a mute button on your device, you may want to look to see if that is unmuted.
Okay, we seem to have a problem there with hearing from Helen. Let's move on and then we'll come back and try again. The next registrant is Dave Davis, Coster Street, Madison, neither support nor oppose, wishing to speak. Dave, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to say I'm generally supportive of the draft concept plans for the 3 focus areas. I think planning staff has done a great job on those, and it would be exciting if they came to fruition. I'll touch on a couple of the concerns that I and some other people have, and they're explained further in a letter that we submitted today to the Plan Commission from the South Madison neighbors. The first one is in regards to the zoning changes, land use changes, and the New Heights map. I would like to request that there's time allowed for neighborhood and community consideration discussion of those documents, as well as feedback and discussion with planning staff and our alder. The meetings that were held last week were the first time that anyone in the public, I believe, has seen any of those documents, and I'm not sure that people have really had time to digest those. The previous public informational meetings this year have pretty much focused entirely on the draft focus area concept plans. So I think the community would appreciate more time to review some of those new things. The other issue that I would like to bring up is the failure to include any discussion of the potential impacts of the Alliant Energy Center's master plan and destination district vision and strategy on South Madison. The draft plan contains a section that talks about the Alliant Energy Center specifically wasn't included in the South Madison plan because the county has adopted or approved the master plan. That is just not the case. The county has not approved the Alliant Energy Center's master plan or their destination district vision and strategy. So the concern is that what's proposed in those county documents are really textbook examples of what leads to gentrification. And one of the stated goals of the South Madison plan is to prevent gentrification in South Madison. Yet we haven't been allowed to have any discussion about how to resolve those two competing interests. And I want to make it clear that I'm not proposing that we would create a master plan for the Alliant Energy Center. They already have one. but I think we need to discuss the potential impacts, both good and bad, that the Alliant Energy Center's plans can have on South Madison.
Thank you, Dave. That concludes your available time. Let's try again with Helen Kitchell to see if we can hear from her. Can we unmute Helen on our end? And hopefully she's figured out how to unmute on her end.
Helen, you should be seeing a prompt to unmute. Oh, just a second. I think Helen did join on the phone as well.
Okay, yes, I called
Excellent.
in.
Okay, very good. Helen, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry for the delay. My microphone wouldn't
That's fine. Go
be
ahead.
recognized.
Yeah.
So anyway, my primary concern is one of the same points that Dave just mentioned, and that is that about the new land use designation and height designations that have not heretofore been discussed. I think the South Madison plan has been discussed in detail, and yet these new designations suddenly came out last Wednesday, and people have not had an opportunity to review and understand their implications and have had an opportunity to provide feedback. They had those 2 Zoom meetings, but they were poorly attended and poorly advertised in advance. So I really would like to see a greater opportunity to provide input on those things that have potential for significant impacts to the South Madison as well as our Bay Creek neighborhood, because we're immediately adjacent to those areas. Those are my primary concerns, that there needs to be adequate opportunity to review those and to provide public input. And the other question that this came from sitting through the town of Madison earlier is, how has the town of Madison been reached out with regard to the South Madison plan? If they are just now being reached out to, have they not been, has their input not been received with regard of this whole South Madison plan? So I guess I would ask that of staff to try and fill us in on that one.
Is that it, Helen?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions of either of our registrants? I don't see that there are questions of our registrants. Jeff, did you have something you wanted to comment on?
I just wanted to get unmuted again for questions, but as far as reaching out to the town residents, we've been reaching out to them through this whole process of the South Madison plan. I think what Angela was mentioning, it's a very targeted effort to reach out to them in advance of October 31st, 2022, to talk to them about things like what's going to happen with taxes or garbage collection, things like that, more detailed information.
I think that was pretty well covered. So thank you. And that's a good outreach effort that we understand are going to continue.
Yeah.
So, commissioners, do you have questions of staff about the South Madison plan? Alder Lemmer.
Thank you. With regards to the comments from the folks who came and spoke about the need for more communication, I think the timeline says that this is going to be introduced in November is the hope, and it will be voted on by the council in January. So that seems like that gives time for more engagement. Is there anything being planned for additional public engagement? Has that been discussed?
Yes. So we started last week with Zoom meetings. We're allowing for a 3-week public comment period. Middle of this week, we'll be sending out a link to a survey where folks can give us feedback that way, detailed feedback on the entire plan document. We also have scheduled some in-person drop-in sessions at the library with planning staff. One will take place on this Thursday, and another one the following Monday. Thursday session are in the morning. Monday session is in the evening to try to get allow flexibility for folks to drop in. We're also available via phone, email. We've had, I'm sorry, it's Tuesday, not next Monday. It's next Tuesday. We've had we're open to meeting with the folks in the Bay Creek neighborhood about that Olin Triangle. Again, we feel like we've been offering a number of options. We had just last week, Thursday, we had an in-person event at Penn Park. So we're trying to offer both virtual and in-person opportunities to provide us feedback on the plan.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for right now.
Okay, thank you, Alder. Alder Evers.
I think I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding that Olin Triangle, I have spoken with Heather Stouter, and she has let me know via email that staff is willing to meet with residents of District 13 to discuss the proposed changes. And I've emailed residents in District 13 and Dave Davis and suggested that we try to organize a neighborhood meeting soon so that feedback and engagement can take place. I think the concern is connects to Commissioner Fernandez's comments at the presentation recently on the McGrath proposal for the 18-story project, that there really hasn't been any particular planning in this area and very little resident engagement, and yet we were making all these changes that weren't supported by plans. So that we have, in the absence of a real thorough planning process, because residents in District 13 and Bay Creek were not included in the South Madison plan because they're north of Winger Creek. It is interesting to note, and I'll close with this, of any residents or neighborhoods that would be impacted by changes in that Olin Triangle, certainly you would have to say that Bay Creek residents would be. And so we need to really make sure their voices are heard. So I'm glad that staff is willing to cooperate in that process, and I hope residents who have showed up tonight expressing this concern will participate in a neighborhood meeting so we can get that kind of necessary engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder, and thank you for being here to contribute. Are there other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. So I've heard a number of comments, some written in and some from people about the absence of the Alliant Energy Center plan, being excluded from this. And I understand from a standpoint of staff time, not wanting to duplicate efforts, but I'm finding it even confusing myself to review our plan completely absent any information from the Alliant Energy Center plan. So one question would be whether that plan is adopted or not by Dane County. Can we put it on our plan for information purposes only, just to create coherence with the whole plan, not spend a lot of extra staff time on it, but also not show it as a black hole in the middle of this neighborhood plan and show how these two link. And to the extent that they don't link or actually conflict, I think we do need to address it. I know that we don't want to spend staff time, but I think that we have a responsibility to at least address if that plan is actually conflicting with ours in some way, or even just to note that in our plan to say this is Dane County's plan, not yet adopted. It is not consistent with our goals in the following 3 ways. Something like that, just to include it informationally in the plan.
I see that Heather Stouter wants to respond to that. Heather?
Thank you, Chair Zellers, and thanks again, Commissioner Fernandez. Jeff, if you wouldn't mind pulling up just the plan area map, I can speak from that. So I want to clarify just a couple of things that have been discussed this evening. The county did take on 2 separate efforts, and Jeff will maybe be able to show with his cursor as I talk here. Oh, okay, yeah, that'll work. The Alliant Energy Center property proper is what is actually sort of the donut hole of the city's planning process. And so the county did undertake a significant process on its own Alliant Energy Center property. Now, this was pre-pandemic. Things have changed a lot. All of you are very familiar with how the Alliant Energy Center has been used to serve many different purposes through the pandemic, directly supporting public health needs, et cetera. And the future, I think, of the Alliant Energy Center is as yet unknown. We could see something pretty similar to what's there now moving forward for the foreseeable future. That's certainly not the hope of the county. We could see a dramatic transformation, not unlike the magnitude of transformation we've been talking about at the East Town Mall area. We have focused on the property outside of the Alliant Energy Center proper, but I want to make it really clear that the county also took on another effort, which was that destination district study surrounding the Alliant Energy Center. And every property that was included in that destination district study is included in the South Madison plan. And so the city's plan, the South Madison plan, will be the adopted city plan moving forward for the areas immediately surrounding the Alliant Energy Center. That includes what we're calling the Olin Triangle site on the north side. It includes the Rimrock site just to the east of the Alliant Energy Center and other properties ringing it. And so I just want to make that really clear that we did not omit or decide that we weren't going to plan in the areas around the Alliant Energy Center. As the council adopted the resolution back in 2019 for this plan to move forward, we all agreed at that time, pre-pandemic, that we would basically give a nod to the county's plan for its own property on the Alliant Energy Center. And so that's how it moved forward. I think we have taken, we've made quite an effort to come up with plan recommendations that can work well, regardless of how the Alliant Energy Center proper ends up moving forward and how quickly. So it could stay, it's always going to be, a major traffic generator. It's always going to have, very large gatherings, region-wide, statewide gatherings. We know that it has impacts on its immediate surroundings, and it will continue to. And we tried to make sure that the land uses and infrastructure recommendations that we're making around the Alliant Energy Center are flexible to accommodate the pace of change there and the magnitude of change around AEC. So I hope that has brought just a little bit of clarity to it, but we never ignored the areas around the Alliant Energy Center campus. And we have always seen the AEC, the Alliant Energy Center campus, as a major generator of activity, traffic, et cetera, that it is today. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you, Heather.
It certainly does.
Commissioner, do you have further questions?
Yeah, that certainly helps. And I didn't want to state that as a criticism so much as a suggestion that somehow that information be illustrated in this plan so that one can evaluate it coherently together. I had some other comments, but I don't know if this is the appropriate time for them.
Yes, go ahead. You've got the floor.
Comments or questions? There's a proposed bridge over the Beltline at Perry Street that's shown as a secondary connection. This is just by way of giving feedback. I'd really like to make that primary, if at all possible. I think that's a very important connection over the Beltline. We came very close to building a bike and pedestrian bridge there a couple of years ago, well, a couple decades ago. Time flies. But I think that was superseded by some recommendations to actually make that a street, and the state and the DOT did some study area in there. There's a desperate need for both a vehicular and a bike and pedestrian connection over the Beltline in that area. So I'd really like to see that proposal be elevated if at all possible. Want to strongly support the crossing of the railroad tracks at extension of North Street. Notwithstanding that it is difficult to cross railroad tracks, I think maintaining that as a prime priority. Crossing is totally on point. Really support that. And the extension of the Cannonball Path, I would again just heartily support that. We have probably $10 million already invested in the rest of that Cannonball Path, and it doesn't really reach its potential until that makes it up to the Wingra Path. And any possible crossings of that north-south railroad seem really crucial to me. So I'm not really seeing I'm seeing a possible path crossing there at Penn Street, which I strongly agree with. But the one to the north of that, I don't believe, does that exist? Right there.
That's an existing street, yeah.
And it does cross the railroad at that point. Yes. Okay. Because that feels to me really crucial in this neighborhood, is to get some connectivity across that railroad track. So
there is a bit of a pinch point at the bridge, the rail bridge, but it does cross.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fernandez. Did you have any other questions or points that you would like to make?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Just one comment, although I'll add that I agree with Commissioner Fernandez on the connections in particular. I think the taller height limits along John Nolan and Rimrock, I understand that those need to be introduced to the neighborhood a bit more, but I do think they are a very important tool of this plan in terms of balancing, being able to accommodate future growth while still being able to maintain those lower density residential areas so that we can mitigate displacement. So I really appreciate the time and thought that went into the development of the Thorstad area and, moving that from RMU to a lower density. I really liked that concept plan. But, I think to be able to keep some of those lower density areas, I think that those higher height limits are important. So I really appreciate kind of the balance of those two in this plan. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Fernandez's comments about the extension across the Beltline and the Cannonball Trail bike path and the importance of the street extension of across the railroad tracks that would connect Fish Hatchery with Park Street. I think that would be very important. Also, I agree with Commissioner Solheim. I know that the neighborhood has concerns about the height limitations, especially in the Triangle area, Olin and John Nolan. But I think that's where we want the height and the density. And I think that John Nolan is a major corridor into the city, and I think that's where we should expect it. And so I guess, I'm interested in hearing what the neighborhood has to say, but I know that we've heard a lot from the neighborhood on the development on that restaurant area, which the name escapes
McGrath development.
McGrath development. So and the staff is not recommending 18 stories, which I know that was for most of the commission beyond the pale for us. But I think the height limitations as proposed by staff are very good. I guess I'd like staff's input on the area of the fish hatchery and the Beltline. They're recommending 2 stories within that area, and it's kind of a corner of 2 major, streets, and 2 stories seems pretty limited. So I guess I'd like your thought process on that. Another area which I find is kind of a no man's land area, and it's north of the mobile home park, and it's some large parcels. That area, I guess, it's shown on the aerial photos, just trees. So I'm assuming that there's some maybe single family houses with some large parcels, but I think there's an opportunity there for additional low density, and I know that's what you show there, but maybe some additional street connections are proposed could happen in that area. The other site that I guess I'd like your comments on is the area just south of the Alliance Center, and I think there's a number of 4-unit buildings. Just beyond that, that area, the 2-story area. I think there's some very low density apartments there, and I know we don't want to displace anyone, but I think that some additional density there may be appropriate because it's adjoining the Alliance Center. And that we may, expect something additional on the Alliance Center that density might be appropriate. The other area, and I understand the interest to preserve the mobile home park, and that's a very large area for affordable housing, but I think I read in the report that mobile home park was developed in 1960. So I don't know if the mobile homes have been replaced. I'm assuming some are newer than others, but some of those mobile homes may be 60 years old. So the question I have is, what's the life expectancy for a mobile home, and shouldn't we be looking at the overall issue of affordable housing in the area? And if some of the area is replaced with affordable low density housing that could accommodate those individuals, would that be a more appropriate strategy than to preserve housing that has a temporary life? And so that's a question, I guess, that I have, and I would just like to throw it out to the commission. But I understand, we go to the hookah restaurant quite often, so I'm familiar with that area. So, and one of my friends last night indicated he used to live in there several, years ago, but he lived in the mobile home park. So, so I understand the need to keep affordable housing, but I guess I'd like to open that up for comments. So thank you. Those are my suggestions.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, the thinking of staff, I think first on the fish hatchery and the Beltline, the 2 stories, what was the thinking on having that such low density?
So there is some existing residential, 2 or duplex, 4-plex type buildings in this general area. Again, it was that concern over displacement of residents. This is something we perhaps could look at and review to see if 3 or maybe 5 stories max may be more appropriate here. So I think we're open to rethinking that perhaps. But again, we're with feedback we heard about trying to preserve affordable residential in the neighborhood. This is one area. It kind of creeps closer to the Beltline, but it is there. I think the next area was the Capitol View neighborhood, kind of this area of the larger lots. Initially, it was our fourth focus area. We showed 3 concepts that showed a street grid and 3 different ways to add additional housing into that neighborhood. We were given very clear feedback from the community that there was no way that that was going to happen in that neighborhood. They did not want that. And based on that feedback, it was decided to take that focus area concept out of the plan and make any recommendations for the area east of the tracks within the written recommendations. We also heard feedback that those residents really enjoy that wooded area. It brings a lot of wildlife into the neighborhood. And so we decided to back off of making recommendations in that area. Similar feedback was given when the 2005 plan was given or was drafted, and at that point it was decided to take that area out of the plan as well. The area south of the Atlantic Energy Center property, again, it is kind of your low medium residential. I guess the thinking behind the transition down to 2 stories from 5 stories was it was a way to transition back into this residential neighborhood. Again, this potentially is an area where we could revisit the recommendations and see if it made sense to potentially change that recommendation. And then as far as the mobile home park goes, it is the most affordable housing in this area. The lifespan of a mobile home can range anywhere between 30 and 50 years. We did take a tour of the entire park with the owners, I believe it was last October, to kind of gauge the condition of the mobile homes in that park. And it is wide ranging. There are some brand new units in there. There are some units that are in need of desperate repair. However, I think we found the conditions better than expected. We've also held a couple of listening sessions with the members of the mobile home community. And a lot of them gave us feedback that they really like living there. They like the location. They like how secluded it is. And that it was really important to them to be able to maintain the mobile home park. I think, if the city were to somehow build some additional affordable housing and relocate those residents, I think we'd have a tough time, finding a home that everyone who currently lives there could still afford, even with it being affordable. That's we heard loud and clear from the community that it's important that the mobile home stay a mobile home park. So that's why we're showing it as we are.
Commissioner Cantrell, did you have any follow-up?
No, I think that's kind of what I expected, the comment. And that's fine. I guess I have no issue with that, but I think it's going to be something that we'll have to revisit maybe in 20 years from now. But I think and I understand the affordable housing issue, and I understand that not displacing anybody, but we're going beyond, I think, where maybe we should be, because the need of housing in Madison And this area is so central to the city that I think that maybe we're going a little bit too far. But again, I guess I understand staff's thinking. Thank you.
In kind of conjunction with that too, I keep thinking about our the bus rapid transit discussion we had, and the likelihood that South Park Street is going to be a bus rapid transit area. And are we creating the kind of density in the plan that we had talked about being important for transit-oriented development? So that, to kind of piggyback in a way on your comments, Commissioner. Commissioner Spencer.
Thank you. I don't want to repeat anything. I want to support the density in the Olin Triangle. And like Commissioner Cantrell said, I'm also interested in hearing about the residents that will have an impact on them. But in general, I am supportive of that. If I learned anything in urban planning school, I think it was, you build up or you build out. So 2 years for that. Thank you. And in terms of height along South Park Street, I get why the residents don't want it too high there or too dense, especially with the parks and the schools nearby. I just wish that we, it is a major street, the potential for bus rapid transit and right off the Beltline. I just wish there was a potential there for a little bit more height, maybe higher along Park Street and stepping down. I'm supportive of it in general along South Park Street. I just wish it could go a little bit higher. And I've been on the Plan Commission now long enough. I'm seeing more and more projects that we've approved that have been developed. And, I often go by one of the 4-story buildings that we approved, and I always think it could be a couple stories higher, for the street where it's located. And even, one of the recent senior housing developments over by Gammon, that we looked at Urban Design Commission. That's another building I see quite often. And I think the space where it is, it could have gone higher. But it is a shock to think about like 12-story, 8-story buildings where there are none. So I get that.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner, for your comments.
If I could just add one thing about Park Street corridor, given that, more work needs to be done on the north-south BRT route, we don't know where the stops are and all of that. We do have a recommendation in the plan to do a study for a TOD overlay for BRT corridors and high traffic transit corridors for South Madison. So that is a recommendation in the plan.
Thank you, Jeff. Commissioner Hagenow.
Thank you, Chair. I just kind of wanted to reiterate or reaffirm everything that the prior commissioners have stated. I do think that Park Street is ripe for higher buildings along there, as with John Nolan Drive. But at the same time, with some of this redevelopment, I just my mind keeps going back to a late letter that we received, public comment from Alex Salotis regarding the historic preservation of some of the buildings in the neighborhood. And so I was just wondering if staff had seen that letter, and I know it came in pretty late, so maybe you've got some comments on that.
Sure. So yeah, we did see it late this afternoon. We have looked at the underrepresented survey. There are 12 sites within South Madison. They're generally in this vicinity. We do have a kind of we're calling it a past, present, future section of the plan, kind of the history of South Madison. I think some of the comments about being a little bit more deliberative, pointing, of historical preservation. I think we could probably beef up that chapter a little bit, talk about what's in the underrepresented survey, and talk about, if there's if something should be preserved, that sort of thing. So I think we'll definitely take that feedback to heart and look at ways we can beef up some of that information in that chapter.
Excellent. One other thing that kind of struck me, the crossing kind of west of the Alliant Energy Center of the railroad tracks there. I know you'd said that that's kind of a hiccup point. Yeah, so it's a one lane kind of underpass, as I recall, right there. And I don't know if there's any possibility of being able to, make that a 2-lane underpass. But I think looking at that, I think it would get more use that way.
Yeah, I believe that area was just reconstructed not too long ago. There's a fairly significant bridge. I don't know if it has any historical value or not, but it really is the pinch point and does not allow widening at that one specific point.
All right. Thank you very much. Great report, and I appreciate the time and effort that staff put into it. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would just like to comment too. I also support the heights, like in the triangle and along John Nolan Drive, and I agree with Commissioner Cantrell in looking at the intersection there of Fish Hatchery and the Beltline and the small rectangle next to the Alliant Center, and also the connections that were emphasized by Commissioner Fernandez, and the road at Perry Street, I think it was, over the Beltline, and the connections across the railroad tracks. And also appreciate Commissioner Hagenau's bringing up Alex Salutos's memo to us. Too often we do 250-page plans, like, this underrepresented group, and then we don't follow through and include them in the more specific plans. And so I think that that's pretty important, because that was one of the points of this underrepresented group. We have not recognized some of these special heritage and historic places. And if there are such structures or places here, we need to make sure that that we recognize them, so that going forward, we can consciously choose whether to save or not save. So thank you, Commissioner Hagenau and Alex Salutos, for raising that as an issue. We do have another comment or question. Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And really just thanks to everything. I agree with virtually everything that's been said. Really just wanted to add that. Could we take a look for just 1 second at the proposed bike overlay? And I just want to add one smallish comment to that. The Olin Triangle is particularly if it's going to be developed with 12 stories. That's a lot of residents, and then we have the whole Alliance Center. I want to make sure that it has access to the Winger Creek path, and I'm not sure that it does. I perhaps have to familiarize myself with that area, but there's going to be a lot of demand to go from that area over to the park, and we want this to be a walking, so even if it's not a high-level bike path, it's at least a wide sidewalk that connects those two. And we have this wonderful underpass of John Nolan right there at the creek, but we don't necessarily have a good way to get to the path along the creek. We even have a path on both sides of the creek, which is great. But I want to make sure that we can get from whatever is developed in that area to that path along the creek. And that I'm not quite certain is represented here. So maybe just take another quick look at that area and see if we could show a path extension from the Winger Creek path down into that area to assure that if it gets developed piecemeal, whoever is there gets a good access to that underpass, that bike ped underpass of John Nolan at that location.
Thank you, Commissioner Fernandez, for that good observation, and I'm sure staff will follow up on making sure that there's a good connection there. Thank you. Commissioner Cantrell.
I just wanted to comment on the concept plans that staff showed. I support all of those. I think that this one, the South Madison plan, the Village Park focus area, and the Thorsten one too. I think those are excellent, and I'm hoping again that we get that railroad crossing, which I know is always very, very difficult. But I think that those are very exciting, and I think that that would provide some low density affordable housing for the neighborhood, and I think that's exactly what they would be looking for. And if we do displace some, I think that's where we could pick up a significant amount of low density housing. So, but I think those are excellent plans.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think I have heard pretty good consensus among commissioners. Could we get rid of the plans now, please? Thank you. Are there any commissioners who heard things from fellow commissioners that you've got concerns about? Because I think I've heard pretty much consensus, but I want to make sure. I don't see any raised hands. Then my next question is, staff, have you gotten what you need and wanted from the Plan Commission to be able to proceed with your next steps?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And I want to also say, staff does a great job with putting together these plans. So thank you very much. There are so many things to try to balance and integrate. So thank you for your work on these. And with that, we will move on our agenda. Is there any business by members? Seeing no raised hands, Secretary's report.
Thank you again, Chair Zellers. I'll look forward to the October 18th meeting, 2 weeks from this evening, and just mention a few of the items there. First one on the list, the review of the rezoning proposal for 3202 Dairy Drive on the city's far southeast side from light industrial to the new Mission Camp District. And we'll have more for you soon on that, but this will just be a rezoning of the property to enable its use as a mission camp or campground site. Further down the list, the 2002 Winnebago Street I mentioned last time. This is a demolition and conditional use for a new 4-story building with 24 apartment units. And then 1501 Monroe Street, a conversion of the Hotel Red into a mixed-use building with 50 apartment units. So this is one of what will potentially end up being a few hotel conversions in the coming years, but I think the first that we're seeing at the Plan Commission level. And then on November 8th, I want to remind folks that this evening you referred the core spaces proposal on State and Gorham, and that will be referred to November 8th. We'll also have this first on the list here on the city's far northeast side on Felland Road, new multifamily residential building complex and townhomes at the Jana Village plat. So a total of 247 units before you on November 8th on the far northeast side. Those are the two I'll mention for the 8th. And I think that's it for this evening. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. I think we are at needing a motion to adjourn. Is there moved by Commissioner Cantrell? Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Hagenow, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Okay, thank you, everyone.